All right, we are on air. Happy Thursday, everybody. Thursday's Backdrop Day. Happy Backdrop Day. We're here to talk to you today about Backdrop CMS, which is a comprehensive content management system for people who are particularly concerned about their budgets. So that would be small, medium-sized business, nonprofit, maybe some educations, because Drupal 8 is going to be a very big, expensive enterprise system that can do a whole lot of things. But there are going to be some people who need a cheaper, more affordable, lighter weight solution. And we're trying to take Drupal 7 and move it forward to that place that'll work for people who need the lightweight alternative to Drupal 8. So Backdrop CMS is a fork of Drupal, early Drupal 8, with some things simplified. Our long-term goal is to create a tool that is comparable in terms of features with Drupal 8 and run on architecture that's more similar to that of Drupal 7. While creating that product, we're also going to be fixing bugs. So those are bugs that were identified in Drupal 7, as well as bugs that have been identified in Drupal 8, and ones that we have found ourselves, and simplifying existing systems. So when it doesn't require changing the APIs too much to do so, we're going to be decreasing the abstraction, increasing the performance, and trying to make the system make a little bit more sense. We're also going to be adding new features, so perhaps some that Drupal 8 doesn't have, that we find the community needs. We'll add those in as well, as long as it doesn't require very much API change to do that as well. We're hoping to release Backdrop 1.0.0 this fall, so that is very soon. And what the first release will be is just a working version of the product that contains some of the things that we're working on now. We'll talk about that later. And then after the first version is released, we'll continue to iterate and release new versions every quarter. So we'll have bug fixes as needed, and then we'll have minor versions come out. And those minor versions can also contain new features. So we don't have to get to a completely comparable system in the first version of Backdrop, because we'll continue to iteratively add new features as time goes on, which is great. In terms of what we're working on right now, we've got 3 major issues which are release blockers. The first is the one I'm most excited about. That's the Blocks and Layouts initiative. This is something that was taken on early in the Drupal 8 cycle and dropped because of the complexity required in getting it to happen. We're reviving that, putting it back in Backdrop. We're going to fix the one layout for every page problem that Drupal's been suffering from years, for years and years. And Nate has been doing a ton of work on getting that in. Do you want to give us a little update, Nate, on where we are right now?
Yeah, sure. So visually, things are about where they have been from our demo a couple weeks ago. If you visit our YouTube page, then it'll probably be the 4th video down after this live stream. There's a demo of the layout module in action, and things are pretty much exactly as they're demonstrated in that video. But since then, we've been doing a whole bunch of work, sort of tightening up the ship a little bit and making it so that everything works and functions correctly. We had a couple users download and try out layout module from my branch, which is super appreciated. Thank you very much. Specifically, BW Panda, thank you for the excellent reporting on the problems that you encountered. Last week and the week before, we were saying that the biggest holdup was automated testing, but at this point, we've completely updated all of our automated testing, so that now everything that block module tested, we're testing all of that and more in layout module. At this point, it's one of the more comprehensively tested systems in Backdrop, as it should be, considering it's brand new, it's likely to be buggy and things like that. But we have really super comprehensive testing now at this point, checking conditions, overriding paths, creating menu items, testing those menu items work correctly, positioning, contexts, all of that jazz. So we're pretty well all good. Let's see, we're pretty much pull request ready at this point, I think. I'm still reviewing the code to see that I'm not missing anything. I documented just earlier today the numerous API changes that that this will have, because blocks touch on a lot of things for sure, and we're changing a bunch of stuff, which is one of the things that we're trying to avoid is unnecessary change, but the reward for this change is so dramatic that it's going to be well justified. So that doesn't mean that we don't need to document it, however. So I've been working on making sure that I don't leave out any API changes that this causes. So that issue is issue 86, as always, in the Backdrop issue queue on GitHub. If you want to follow along or try it out, we'll probably see the first pull requests here maybe by tomorrow, sometime next week at the latest, and then we're hoping for a merge sometime, in the near future, in the next week or two, assuming that we don't find any more problems. At the very least, we're just in really, really good shape. I feel like we're really good for a first pass. Oh, speaking of first pass, I made a follow-up issue with a whole slew of follow-up tasks, creating new blocks, adding token support, custom text support, finishing up a whole bunch of to-dos in the code.
Plugin versions, adding new layouts.
Yeah, adding settings for layouts. Actually, I didn't add adding new layouts. You mean beside? I don't know. We'll need to talk about that. Out of the box, you get 3 layouts. You get a 1-column layout, a 2-column layout, and you get a layout that imitates Bartik. So if you're upgrading from Drupal 7 using the Bartik theme, all of your blocks get moved over into the new layout system with a Bartik-like layout. If you're using something else, there are capabilities to make it so that your theme would map to a particular custom layout during the upgrade path. And that's actually tested. We actually have tests for that as well. But how that actually will work, effectively is yet to be seen. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff to be done yet, but our initial rollout is looking really good. Next couple of weeks, probably we'll see it in 1.x. That's all I've got on layouts, which is a lot.
So other things we're working on that are also release blockers is the config management system. So this gives us an ability to store our configuration someplace other than our database. So the content goes in the database and the configuration will go into files. And then when you want to deploy a new feature to your site, you'll just take those configuration files, move them into your staging directory on the live site, and then import them, which is great. We've got the subsystem in already, and we've got a couple of other systems in Drupal using config management already, in Backdrop. But we have a couple of major parts of Backdrop that aren't yet using config management, most notably content types and fields. And if you don't have content types and fields using CMI, you don't really have CMI. So we need to get those done definitely before we can release. And then there's a bunch of other smaller systems we also need to get moved over. The variables, we've got most of our variables converted, but there's a handful left. Some of them need to be turned into states, and some of them need to be turned into config. We'll figure that out as we go through those. And that is a big sticky point remaining for us. So if anyone wants to work on CMI or see how Backdrop is handling CMI, we would love your help on those issues. And the other thing, which is less of a release blocker, is the Views in Core movement. Views was the #1 contributed module in Drupal 7, and we've put the Views itself in Core, the Views module, but there's a bunch of things in Core that generate lists of stuff that could use Views. And I know we've had a bunch of work on that lately with people generating some views for us, but it would be good to get all of those things converted to views before we ship. If we don't, it's not a big deal. We can convert them later, which is why it's not a release blocker. But it would be nice to have good examples of views in Core. So we've got an issue that needs review. That's probably on my plate right now. And a couple of other pull requests.
Yeah, a couple more have been coming in. Doc Wilmot converted a block, as did BW Panda. So yeah, we've got a number of them that are converted, but I don't think that there's an upgrade path yet. And I don't think they've actually replaced the current views. They all just are adding views.
Well, that's a good starting point.
Yeah, it's a good starting point.
Okay, so I'll take a look at those and see what we need to do. I'm not really sure how we're going to handle the upgrade path, but I'll look at that and see if it's a blocks to layouts thing, whether that should go in before layouts or after. Do you have a feeling on that?
Sorry, Kat. Um, um, I don't know.
Okay. Well, we can talk about it offline too.
Okay.
But yeah, so we've got a couple of things that are on my plate there. And then there's some other stuff that we're working on in Backdrop as well. Most importantly, keeping up with what's going on in the Drupal world. So anything that's been committed to the latest version of Drupal core also needs to be committed to Backdrop, as long as we decide we want that changed. Most notably, the important ones there are the security fixes, right? When there's a security problem with Drupal, we need to make sure the same solution or another solution to the same problem exists for Backdrop. And then other things are little user interface improvements and other bug fixes that go into 7. We've got to get those in Backdrop as well so that we're not behind where Drupal 7 is. And then we also have sub-lists of all of the changes that are going on in Drupal 8. The ones that we think are most important to get into the first version of Backdrop, we've got in sub-meta issues. We've got 2 that are left that need some attention. There is the issue that includes all of our HTML5 elements. We want to make sure Backdrop is responsive and mobile friendly out of the box, so there's a couple of those remaining. And we also have a little cleanup on our JavaScript that just involves running JS hint on the code that we have just to make sure that it's formatted and consistent throughout all of core. So if we have anyone who is interested in working on the HTML5 conversions or JS hint, there's only a handful of those left, which is great. I think we'll definitely get those done before we ship Backdrop 1. And then we've got a bunch of other stuff that we're also working on that is not a release blocker, but that we do want to get in Backdrop. The first of which is separating our identity from Drupal's identity. Since we're a fork of the Drupal project, our software looks like Drupal. When you install Backdrop, it looks like installing Drupal. We want to make sure that it feels completely different. So we've got some new branding on our installer page, which is good, but we want new branding on the administration section too. I know Julia's doing a bunch of work on design, and she's got some CSS changes she's moving into our style guide for us, which will be great. But what we're going to need to do as soon as we're done with that is start creating issues to actually apply those style changes to the 7 theme in Backdrop, and also changing its name so it's not 7. And then we've also got some theme system cleanup tasks. A few of these we're working on right now. A couple of other ones are going to be dealt with after the layout conversion, because layouts is going to change so much of how theming changes. It's more important that we get that done. And then we've got some user experience improvements going on as well that just involve cleaning up of general things, making sure names for things are consistent, using terminology that makes sense to people, and then, of course, my personal favorite, getting a rich text editor into core. That might not be done before the 1.0.0 release, but if we have someone that's super passionate about getting it done, we would love some help with that. So if we could get it done, we would. If not, we will just do it in 1.1 or 1.2, something like that. We've got another section here of final reviews. There's a bunch of stuff that we want to kind of do a once over before we release. And so far we've got 2 things on that list. We have a CSS review. We've finished all of our CSS cleanup from the meta issue of backports from Drupal 8, but we've changed it a little bit to meet our own coding standards instead of Drupal 8's coding. We're adding another one here, which is a markup review for our layouts. So if we can have someone who is in the HTML snot, preferably, look at our HTML and say you're doing it wrong, or if you've got improvements for how we should do it, it would be great to have that feedback on those templates as well. So 2 things there that we could use a little review of. Hopefully the layout markup review is probably going to be fairly straightforward because we only have 3 layouts right now. The CSS review is a little bit more extensive. We just want to make sure all the files are in the correct directories, named correctly, and are using our coding standards. So that might be more of a you've got a whole weekend free rather than an hour. You want to churn through all those files and be like, found something in the wrong place or what have you. There's also a section in this weekly meeting for updates from the PMC. So if we have any issues that are sticky in the issue queue and need to be escalated for further discussion, we take this part of the meeting to explain our decision and why back to the larger community. But we don't have any issues that have been sticky and escalated lately, so this is still just kind of a placeholder in this meeting. So we've got a bunch of stuff that we're working on that is not Backdrop CMS the project, but is Backdrop CMS the stuff you need to run a project. And primarily we have a couple of websites we're working on. The API website, which is up. It's working, which is great. It needs a little love. It's going to need a theme, which we'll probably add after we get a new theme for our own site. It needs a couple of changes to its change notice content types so that we can get the change notices in for all the stuff that Nate's been working on recently for blocks and layouts. And then, of course, we need to add all of those change notices. I know Ron had volunteered a couple of weeks ago to help create all of this documentation for us. I was going to try and lean on him a little bit to also change the content types to match our needs, since he will know best as creating them what's necessary, and he has those skills. But I'm not sure we've actually asked him to do that yet, so we should do that. And then Nate, I don't know if you have had any experience creating those change records yet, either from all of this work on layout stuff. No, just in the GitHub queue. Okay.
Yeah, I've just been marking them there. Although everything that needs a change notice, we've been marking it in the issue queue with the tag needs change notice, and I've been pretty good about trying to document them in the GitHub issue queue, but they need more comprehensive and a centralized list of all of them, I think.
Okay. So that might be something that would be good, too, if we had someone who wanted to jump in there, go find an issue tagged needs change notice, go create change notice and see what you can and can't do, and make sure that we can get that ironed out, too. So that would be great. We also need an update server. Did you talk to Justin about that?
Yeah, some things happened this past week. Justin, or Lars Designs as he's known on the GitHubs and the internet, did a whole bunch of work sort of strengthening the security and getting some of our backend infrastructure set up this week, which is super helpful. Thank you very much, Justin. That involved setting up SSL certificates on the flagship site and on the API website. And he's taking a look, like after he did all of our server administration and just got it sort of running a little bit more smoothly, he volunteered to take a look at just thinking about how we could manage packages and distributions and releases.
Okay.
But he said that he's really just going to be thinking about it because, I mean, he's right that there's like a ton of different directions we could go with this. So he's going to give it some thought. So, I mean, we're open to a lot of options here. I mean, we've imagined that the release system will act very similar to jQuery's website for managing plugins. So if you go to plugins.jquery.com, it's basically a repository that is registered with GitHub, and there's a high amount of communication that happens between GitHub and the jQuery plugins website. And what we're hoping to do is something similar, but there's so many tools out there for package management. Like, we're still open to alternatives. It's just that we have that in mind, but that's not necessarily where we'll end up. It depends on the tools and resources we have available. Or if somebody comes up with a really awesome idea, like, we're open to other ideas as well. But the most likely situation is that packages will be managed on GitHub. We'll use GitHub hooks to communicate with the flagship website. And then the flagship website will be the official repository of, like, the module named, I don't know, web form, the module named flag, but all of the issue management and package management will all happen on GitHub, and then they'll just be synchronized with the flagship website that then lists the canonical version of each one of those projects.
So then the update server will be a separate tool that integrates with the flagship website, and it won't need to talk to GitHub.
Right. Yeah. So your individual backdrop websites with update module will communicate with the flagship website to check if there are updates for a particular module, rather than needing to go to GitHub. And long term, that can mean things like we could, not necessarily lock ourselves into GitHub. You could host your code in other places, but the canonical resource of which version is the most recent will always be backdropcms.org.
Okay, sounds good. So it sounds like he's not only working on the update server, but also on the GitHub service, because those are all closely integrated.
Yeah, I don't want to volunteer.
We're thinking about.
Say that Yeah. I say that he's working on all of them, but
Okay.
that it's
Would it
necessarily
be
on
would
his
it be
own.
good to put him in touch with Kevin? Because Kevin also did some thinking about all of this stuff too. When I was like, you should work on the GitHub service, and he was like, we need to think about this first. So he might have some good ideas there as well. And they do all of their product management on different platforms and whatever. So he's got some experience behind that too. So I'm not
Yeah.
sure either one of them is interested in thinking about it enough to like set up meetings with each other. But as long as they both know that they've both thought about it, would be good to get some, communication going.
Okay. Yeah, think that's a good idea. It's a big project between all three of those things. There's the GitHub service, the flagship website, and then the update module and the update server. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of pieces here.
Okay. So the flagship website, as we were speaking about, also needs a little bit of love. We've got a couple of different things we want to do with it. It's going to get a redesign with a new with our new branding package added sometime around the time that we release, which is great. We've already undertaken some work on getting our dragon mascot illustrated. So hopefully our new website design will be able to incorporate Drop, our dragon, at some point, which will be great. We also want to add a showcase site so we can start getting the sites that are running Backdrop up somewhere for people to see, which will be good. We're going to add a list of all modules and a list of all themes. Of course, we need modules and themes before we can build those lists of them, so that's slightly less of a priority. We also have some other ideas for other things we want to add to that website. There's really great examples of like Drupal.org's jobs section. We can add a jobs section, but we also need to have jobs before we should add a jobs section. So we've got a bunch of great ideas, various different priorities. I think getting the update server module theme thing solved sooner rather than later would be great. But of course, getting a product out is more important than all of those. Okay, sprints. So we sprint every Thursday. Today's Thursday. Woohoo! So after this meeting, if you want to jump in IRC, if there's anything you want to work on, Nate and I are both there. If you want to ask us any questions, make sure to ping us first, because sometimes we have our nose in the code and we don't necessarily know people are trying to get our attention. So if you type our names or IRC handles, it'll make a noise and we'll look up and find out someone wants to talk to us. So definitely join us in IRC, which is great. We also have an in-person sprint coming up at BADCamp, which is the world's largest free Drupal event. BADCamp is going to be November 6th through 9th. We're going to be doing a backdrop sprint on Sunday, November 9th. We have a kind of a sprinting area in the mezzanine level on the second floor, which will have lots of computers and internet and coffee and stuff. There's going to be a whole bunch of other sprinting going on. There's a core development sprint. There's a contrib sprint. There's a bunch of other stuff. So if you want to sprint in anything, you can come. If you're interested in what's going on in Backdrop, you can come poke your nose in at our table and be like, hey, what's going on over here? And we can kind of point you at some issues and explain what we're working on if you want to do. If not, also totally fine. Go sit next door. So our first in real life sprint for the last few months will be at BADCamp, which is super exciting. And then we might schedule some more in the future, and we'll throw them in this agenda so that we can see it weekly. There's a bunch of other stuff we're doing here in the near future to help spread the word about Backdrop. We are doing a talk at the Pacific Northwest Drupal Summit, just so people can hear what it is we're up to. We're going to do a talk at the HTML5 Developer Conference, which I'm super excited about because that's our first chance to pitch software to people who are not Drupal people. So people maybe don't even know what Drupal is. So we could just kind of give them a demo and show them what it is we're working on and get some feedback on what it is the outside community wants from their CMS. And we also get to have that why create another CMS talk, which I think will be really fun. So I'm looking forward a lot to that. And then we have obviously a talk. Well, hopefully we haven't selected sessions yet, but I'm hoping to get a talk in at BADCamp. And then we also have we're going to SymphonyCon in Madrid, which is going to be super excited. I think I'm one of the keynote speakers there on just open source communities in general, and why, how, when forks happen, which I think would be interesting. So that's super fun. There's a bunch of other stuff coming up early next year. We were requested to present a backdrop talk at DrupalCon South America in Bogota. but it was escalated, and they decided that they didn't actually want the backdrop talk, even though the people wanted it. The organization didn't want it, so we're probably going to go anyway. And we'll give talks on Drupal stuff to make people happy, just because I know they're short on talks. But we can talk to people in the hallways about Backdrop if they want to know about it. And then that way we're not on the schedule, we're not offending anyone, but we're there. So if people have questions, they can talk to us in person. So that's on our schedule. Hopefully it'll work out. Who doesn't want to go to Columbia? Sounds exciting. And then DrupalCon Los Angeles is in May. Same thing there. I'm not sure we'll present a talk on Backdrop unless we're specifically asked to. And after we're specifically asked to, we need to get confirmation that that's more than one person's desire, so that we don't present a session and then get in trouble for it again afterwards, like we did with Columbia. And then we also, there's a bunch of other stuff coming up next year. It's not on the schedule yet, but we have also been requested to give a talk on Backdrop at DrupalCon India, but I don't know when that is yet. I don't think they have a website yet, and I told the people who asked me about it to clear that with the Drupal Association first, so we probably won't be doing anything with that for some time to come. So, exciting. I guess that's all I have, and I don't know, Nate, if you want to add anything else to this week's discussion. There's a lot going on.
Yeah, no. I mean, as always, everyone that's interested in participating in Backdrop, just take a look through the issue queue. Issue queue being on GitHub. I think that we still have a couple issues tagged novice. If somebody wants to hop in and do their first pull requests, it's pretty easy to get involved in, and we provide feedback fairly quickly. So yeah, we're seeing an uptick in our participation, which has been fantastic, and it's great to see momentum building. So thank you very much to all of the contributors, and we're hoping to see more in the coming weeks.
Great. All right, well, we will be in IRC if anyone wants to hop in later. Thank you for watching this meeting now, and thank you all people watch in the future. You can tweet at us. We're at Backdrop CMS, or find us in IRC. We're in the Backdrop channel all the time.